Welcome to Altnabreac Towers, Episode 6, The Purchase of Station Cottage, Altnabreac Station. Please note, the following episode is fiction, but it is inspired by true events. It was a night in July 2019, a night that would later be described in hushed whispers as suspicious, in official memos as simply convenient, and in the private, furious thoughts of David Howe's siblings as utterly catastrophic. This was the night Ian Thomas Appleby met David Howe for the first and only time. Ian was a picture of clumsiness and social unpreparedness. He carried a borrowed tie, a worn black rucksack slung over one shoulder, and wore the baffled expression of a man who had accidentally wandered into a murder mystery. Observing him was Elizabeth Howe, calm, calculating, and slightly terrifying in her sheer efficiency. She watched Ian with a mixture of exasperation and quiet satisfaction. "Timing, Ian, is everything," she whispered, as if reciting lines from a play only she had the script for. Ian nodded earnestly, nearly tipping the heavy rucksack onto his foot. "Absolutely. Timing and innocuousness. And solicitors, possibly." Elizabeth pinched the bridge of her nose, a tiny gesture of immense frustration. "You're supposed to help, Ian, not flail around like a chicken in a hurricane." Ian, trying to look composed, adjusted his tie. It promptly snagged on a nearby lampshade. He tugged it free with a nervous smile. "All perfectly normal," he declared to no one in particular. Above Bailey Bannon, the stars twinkled like a panel of judgmental witnesses. Had they been sentient, you feel they would have immediately filed a detailed report with the local constabulary. Fast forward to April 2021. David Howe's estate had finally been opened. Elizabeth Howe, appointed as the executor, quickly realized that managing it required two key things: meticulous, airtight organization, and a very rapid departure from the estate's immediate geographical vicinity. And so, Ian, ever faithful but still spectacularly clumsy, followed her north to Keeper's Cottage in Altnabreac. He claimed he was going on a week of wild camping in Scotland, yet when they both emerged, they looked suspiciously clean, suspiciously dry, and suspiciously unwild. Inside the cottage, Elizabeth placed a large folder on the kitchen table with the precision of a general laying out battle plans. "This folder," she announced, "contains everything: documents, receipts, a few minor fabrications, and a total and complete lack of moral scruple." At that moment, Ian was wrestling with his black rucksack. It tipped over, scattering a flurry of papers across the floor like a flock of startled pigeons. As he scrambled to gather them, he knocked over a mug of very strong tea, which spread across the floor in a dark, ominous stain. "Good thing solicitors forgive minor accidents," he chirped, trying to be helpful. Elizabeth just groaned. "Stop inventing law, Ian." He frowned, looking genuinely confused. "I'm just trying to help. This is, well, it's legally chaotic, isn't it?" Elizabeth sighed deeply. "Yes, Ian, but even chaos has its rules." By May 21st, Ian and Elizabeth arrived at Station Cottage. It was owned by a grieving couple who had absolutely no idea they were about to witness a bizarre performance combining legal farce with slapstick disaster. Ian, with a sense of misplaced drama, plopped the black rucksack squarely onto their kitchen table. "Why don't we do a cash deal?" he asked, a little too loudly. Elizabeth hissed at him from the side of her mouth. "Smile. Look innocent. Cherub-like. Innocent." Ian's attempt at a panic-ridden cherubic smile was a spectacular failure. The inheritance, £160,000 meant for David Howe's siblings, was entirely symbolic inside that rucksack. No actual cash was moved. The entire transaction was destined to go through solicitors in Inverness. The owners, quite reasonably, insisted on formal legal channels. Ian blinked. "Solicitors?" "Ah, yes, of course. Naturally, solicitors," Elizabeth muttered under her breath, just loud enough for the dust motes to hear. "Legal, morally flexible. It's perfectly convenient after July 2019. And so began a bureaucratic farce that would have made Basil Fawlty himself proud. There were endless letters, relentless anti-money laundering checks, and Ian reading complex legal terms aloud as if he were auditioning for a courtroom drama. Elizabeth, meanwhile, punctuated the proceedings with regular weary sighs. Letters were sent to the solicitors claiming the funds for the purchase were from Ian's father-in-law's estate, a statement that was, to put it mildly, technically misleading. Ian had only met David Howe on the night he died. There was no marriage, and David's siblings had received absolutely nothing. The anti-money laundering teams, polite but deeply suspicious, were eventually reassured by this creative narrative. Ian tried to help the process along by reading all the correspondence out loud, his voice echoing in the small cottage. Files toppled off the desk. Pens rolled under chairs. At one point, a particularly aggressive kettle whistled so indignantly it sounded like a formal objection. Elizabeth, witnessing the chaos, flicked her scarf dramatically, I swear. Basil would have handled this with more grace, and he had mice in the kitchen. By June 28th, the ordeal was over. Station Cottage was legally Ian's. The inheritance had been successfully converted into bricks, mortar, and a very large looming headache. The black rucksack now leaned against a wall in the new house, radiating an aura of quiet judgment. Meanwhile, back in Ballybannon, 3 siblings stared at their mailboxes, their phones, and their clocks. Surely she's being responsible with it all, one asked hopefully. Responsible? By leaving everything to her partner? Another questioned, the doubt clear in her voice. It's strategic, said the third, trying to find a reason. Very strategic. They were completely unaware that their inheritance had quietly moved north. Hidden in a fog of bureaucracy, legalese, and the undeniable shadow of that black rucksack, the money had left Ballybannon, been transformed into Station Cottage, and was now registered solely in the name of Ian Appleby. The siblings remained entirely uninformed. David Howe's death, which so perfectly coincided with the arrival of the beneficiaries, remained a highly suspicious event. Back in the cottage, the black rucksack, the scattered paperwork, and one very judgmental kettle observed everything in silence. Ian stared at the rucksack and muttered, almost to himself, "Do you think anyone will ever notice?" Elizabeth sighed, the sound of pure exhaustion. "Not if we stay calm. I hope the kettle doesn't testify." And now, a special author's note as we turn our thoughts to Station Cottage at Christmas. Imagine the scene. Carol singers arrive at the door, their cheerful voices cutting through the crisp winter air. As they begin to sing, they inadvertently set off a kettle-based alarm system inside the property. Elizabeth Howe rushes to the window, peering out into the darkness. She declares, "This is true network rail. Spies, all of them." Behind her, the chicken army, sensing a threat, assumes attack formation, effectively scaring the poor carol singers back down the war zone of a driveway. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Stay tuned, as a special Christmas message will be played for Ian Thomas Appleby and Elizabeth Howe after this. Please follow and subscribe for more from Altnabreac Towers.
Merry Christmas, you filthy animal!